Welcome to the Synapse Podcast. I'm Lauren Prager, CEO of Synapse, and it is my pleasure to be here with a guest joining us from his office in Orlando, Brian Serra from Cole Engineering Services. Great to see you. Thank you so much for taking some time.
Happy to be here.
So we met fairly recently and had a chance to kind of dive into innovation in all sorts of ways. And I wanted to start out by asking you one of my favorite questions, which is what makes you innovative? And when we talked a little bit before, you mentioned, I'm not a techie, I'm not a tech guy, but I still consider myself innovative. So I kind of want to start there as your introduction to the community, both for you and for what Cole Engineering does.
Yeah, I love the idea when we were chatting about this, right? Of you don't have to be the super innovative techie unicorn driving up, coming up with some great idea that's changing the world, that's going to take over to be innovative, right? And the idea of innovating at the margins and wherever that may be. And for me, it's always come out of just not liking when people tell me to do something, right? And you can go back to being little 5-year-old Brian that's running through kindergarten being like, oh, actually, I don't like that rule. What if we did it this way, right? And what if we did it this way? It's a little differently, and always kind of just finding new ways to attack problems and think critically of like, whoa, why, right? Why are we doing this, right? And that's kind of my little innovation heart comes from, right? Where we're coming through and trying to attack things and find new ways to do it, right? It doesn't always have to be the killer app, right? If we were gonna make this, I don't know if that maybe that's an outdated
Those still
analogy
exist. Now
to
sometimes they
prove
live
to
in
prove the non-technical side of me, right? But there we
right.
go.
Now they live in the metaverse, but yes.
Yeah.
So, but it's true. Oftentimes people think that tech is innovation and innovation is tech. And I like to remind people that not all tech is really innovative and not all innovation is in tech. And so you and I share that in common, that tech is not in our background, but we still are part of the innovation community. And that's really what Synapse is all about, bringing people together who have these different perspectives on what we can do to improve a need or create change in our society. So why don't you share a little bit about what CESI or CESI, as we call it, does and how your organization is moving the innovation community forward, not just in Orlando, but in a much bigger way.
Yeah, so our company is a simulation and training company predominantly, not mainly, and that branches out all sorts of different directions wherever it may be because everyone has to train, and simulation is the key to make that drive forward, right? So we support the DoD predominantly, mainly, like I said, um, trying to find new ways to connect systems together, have people train. We're building out the Army's metaverse to oversimplify it as, again, the non techie guy, right? But part of my job is helping to make sure our really smart engineers and techies are able to talk to people and to our customers so that they can understand what they're saying. Um, so if you're talking about soldiers, sailors, airmen that need to train together, they're not always sitting in the same camp, post, or station somewhere. They're scattered throughout the world. They're scattered across different sites, and they need to train real world missions. And they can't do that, right? And that's very expensive if you're talking about, rolling through a tank, you know, rolling through an F-35, Joint Strike Fighter, whatever it may be, right? These people have to train together and communicate. We help that enable that to happen. We build out the simulation and training tools that put them in one singular environment, and so that they can talk together through a laptop, whether they be in a full motion simulator or maybe even embedded training, maybe out in the field somewhere doing live training.
So it's almost like you create real world war games for war fighters to experience and perfect their craft and train together.
I would say it is exactly like that. So you just did my job significantly better. And, what are we, 5 minutes
You
into our chat right now? You just replaced me. but
Not
that's
at all,
like,
not at all. But when you're looking at the outside, sometimes like you kind of synthesize things. So most people don't think of Orlando, Florida, as a haven for model simulation and training technology that's being used by, we try not to use acronyms too much here on the Synapse podcast without defining. So for the DoD, the Department of Defense.
thank
So
you.
what is going on in Orlando, and what's the foundation that has enabled organizations like Coal Engineering and others to thrive? We usually think of simulations in the theme park context, not in the military context. So for those people who are, hearing about this for the first time, talk a little bit, if you would, about what's going on in Orlando for the last several decades that it's enabled a company like yours to be able to be successful in building this framework.
Yeah, so our company's homegrown here in Orlando. In 2004, spun out of another big company, and grown into our own little big company now, to what we are. But over in East Orlando is a hub for simulation and training, and all the DoD, Department of Defense services, the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, and the Marines for the United States of America. As we branch out and their allies, we lead the world in what these things are. Well, it's all happening in East Orlando. This is where the hub has been for decades, beyond, going back to the 60s and 70s. It was born out of here, and it's grown into a $6 billion industry just over here on the east side of town. Um, it's it takes those government buying agencies that has the money. It takes the companies that are developing the technology and building it out, and it takes the community of those like-minded people coming together to share those resources, to share the problem-solving sets. Because you're right, Orlando, think of the simulation, they think of going through Disney and the roller coasters. Well, a lot of those people are all being born out of the same universities, the same environments, and they're all here centrally located. The underlying skill sets may be slightly, different, but in all, they're the same, right? So um, you can always follow the money, right? And that helps drive where it is. But there's this huge um, community over here in Orlando that lives this world. It's what we do.
It's really true. And the more we've dug into what's going on in Orlando between Central Florida and out to the Space Coast, there is this enormous corridor of tech and innovation. And what's really important is how it's truly interdisciplinary. And that's really key. When you think about government entities, you don't exactly imagine anymore truly cutting edge and moving quickly. And when you talk about building the Army's metaverse, that is the most cutting edge technology that we can think of right now. You look at private companies that are on literally engaging in this, and it's hard to understand how you can build something that's so cutting edge and work with an organization that has this reputation for being maybe a little bit slower moving, and probably for good reasons. So how do you square those two things and move fast when you're trying to innovate? It's a challenge for a lot of companies, a lot of corporate innovation leaders, not just within the government context, but even within private companies, to be able to truly move fast through innovation. So what are some of the experiences or lessons learned that you can share about really innovating in a complex system?
Yeah, so I think all those different companies that are working on those meta center initiatives, wherever they may be, they all have unique use cases, even if they're trying to be boiled up, into one, whether it's, individualized gaming, whether it's for work related events, or, work communication, or if it's for the defense purposes, right? The government moves, you said, probably for good reasons. I spent 12 years within the government in the, trying to cut through and cut out our little innovation space before coming over to coal. So I can say most of that is not for good reasons. And
Okay.
that was my that was my mini claim to fame, was trying to cut through all those bad reasons. But there are reasons, and it's a very complicated system with a lot of stakeholders and a lot of stovepipes and a lot of nuance, where you're trying to serve a lot of unique mission sets instead of just trying to provide you know a general commercial product that can go out and be serviced, right? Or that can be sold. So when we as a company now are building the Army's metaverse, along with a whole sea of other stakeholders, right? Not just our company doing it alone. We're working with a giant group of subcontractors. We're working with other prime contractors that are coming together in it, even if we're leading the software side of it. you have to listen to all these different pieces and bring it in, because you have to innovate. To go back to innovating at the margins, you have to find unique ways to bring in commercial technology, because you can't do it alone. You can't do the 1950s method. You have to use commercial tools. You have to use commercial processes, but with these giant like chains on your back, because you're dealing, with the hundreds of government stakeholders that have their own chains on their backs that are, slowing everyone down along the way for reasons, whether they're good or bad, for lots of reasons. Everyone's trying to do good things, but you have to fight through all that, right? So
Yeah, so how you called it before when we were speaking before we got on air, the valley of death. So, that's a pretty harsh term, but it makes sense. And I think that's not just part of what happens in government, but that can happen in industry also. So how do you overcome that space and get through the valley of death so that you can, even if you are innovating at the margins? And I'd love for you to share more about what that means and even what that looks like. But how does this actually happen? Because you seem to have a really good sense of actually how you do pull through bureaucracy or roadblocks to get real innovation moving, even incrementally. And sometimes that's okay. So, what are some of the ways that you've accomplished that?
yeah, the valley of death side of things is really hard, and there's a lot of really smart people trying to solve that problem. Um, where you see something flashy, but how do you make that flashy thing come to reality for, in the government acquisition space, which is not just go find seed funding, right? It's,
Right.
so understanding how to work through that system, understanding the nuances of that is hard, and it takes those stakeholders coming together, right? We've talked about some of the cool little hubs throughout the country. One of them being over in Tampa, right? For SoftWorks, we have one over here in Orlando, the Central Florida Tech Grove, and they come and go every 5 years, right? In different forms. Some have been around to get a lot longer. Some are what's the flavor of the week. There's really cool stuff in Orlando and around the other places with microelectronics. Knew nothing about it 5 years ago, but now there's a lot of money and efforts going towards it. Um, but they're all trying to get through that valley, and they're all trying to find their own little innovation space to project forward, and it's hard, right? It's I wish there was always this easy answer of like, here's what we did, follow this, steps 1 through 10, so
So it seems like there's an element of clarity of vision, perseverance, and willing to experiment that is necessary. That sense of resilience and mission is really key, and I find that is true in every innovator with whom I get to speak, whether they are a startup founder and they are just pushing that boulder up the hill, or they're maybe in your role where you're at a well-established successful and thriving company, but you're still trying to push forward and truly create innovation. But you've got to be creative and resilient and have real clarity of focus and be willing to try and fail. But not everybody's really open to that. I don't know if you've experienced or how and people who in your professional world who are really open to that. But it seems from what you've shared with me and what I see that your work is able to actually create and do and push through some of those challenges. So how do you keep focused and keep going when you're feeling like you're hitting up against that barrier?
yeah. Well, I tell you what, we're an established company, but in the government space that we operate in, there's small businesses and large businesses, and once you become a large business, it doesn't matter if you're Lockheed Martin or Cole Engineering, you're competing against the same stuff, right? So incredible vast resources and incredible everything that you could ever think of, right? That on Lockheed side of the house, and picking on Lockheed because they are the biggest of the big for a reason, right? They've earned their position where they're at, but we have to compete with them on everything we do, especially whether it's simulation and training, cyber work, wherever it may be. We're competing with those types of companies. So how do we keep our people hungry? How do we keep them, competitive? How do we? It's people.
That's
It's
right.
empowering those people to go forth and do good things, right? It's being lean. It's hiring the right staffs of people that think right, like-minded to go out, and they're going to try new things and experiment, and given the space to fail a little bit, but refocus and move around and build that culture out. So, you know, there's one thing that's unique across most innovation spaces: culture, a positive culture, not one that breeds fear or trying to push people down and tell them they can't do things, right? Well, yeah, why can't you do it? Okay, not 10 rounds of approvals to go do, check out a binder from the closet or something, right?
Right. That's important. So let's dig into what an innovation culture actually looks like. And the fact that, Cole is competing with large entities, large companies on very sizable contracts, billion-dollar contracts, and winning and able to do that, you do have a culture of innovation. So what does that actually look like? How do you create a culture where people are willing to take risks? And what do you do when those risks don't work out? Because sometimes they're successful and sometimes not. And I think oftentimes it's easy to know what to do when it's a success. It's hard to know how you handle that in a team to create and continue to foster that sense of that spirit of innovation or experimentation, even when you know it doesn't always work out. So, what are some of the ways that you've been able to successfully build that culture of innovation?
It's being true to what you say you're going to be true to and following through on it. Honestly, it sounds simplistic sometimes when we talk about those things of just tell people what you believe in and then actually follow through with what you believe in, right? And it's not okay, you screwed up, your empowerment's gone, you screwed up, okay, how do we fix it? Or you did great and we're going to celebrate that, right? We're going to have a great cool win party right now, and we're going to bring everyone out, and we're going to have a damn good night, right? We're going to and then we'll get back to doing what we do on the backside of it. But it's, too often in the world, especially in the space that we compete in, that we live in my company, if we're talking about the innovative, the margins, it's those things, right? You're having your people that believe in what you're doing, right? If we're competing with talent, with the giant unicorns of the world that are going out to create really cool algorithms to make people click on their links and stay on their platform longer, and then that's going to save the world. Sounds cool. I work for Unicorn X. Check me out, right? I'm making a lot of money, but I help someone click this button half a second faster than that one, or stay on the platform longer. Right. But we have to compete for that talent because we're doing similar. Everyone's doing software development at some point. So how are we bringing them in? Well, we're selling our mission. We're selling our culture. We're here. It's not for everyone. Not everyone wants to go out and you could view it as we're going out and helping people fight wars, or you could view it as we're going to help our kids be safer and train smarter and prevent wars, which is what most of us that work in this space believe in, right? And that's all part of that culture that gets bound together and moves forward to continue to be able to innovate, if we're tying it back.
100%. There's a sense of mission that is really essential. And I find that companies that have a very clear and compelling sense of mission that they are able to articulate and that they follow through with their actions, not just with, a poster in the proverbial break room, really do make the difference. People obviously, financials matter, but as we've all been hearing for quite some time now, people come to work for more than a paycheck. They come for a sense of purpose, and it's really essential to share that. And what I think is fascinating about the work that you do is that you are able to help accomplish a mission that is essential with a sense of purpose, and that drive towards innovation does help to protect national security. It does help to protect the individual warfighter. It does help to protect our society at large. And being on the cutting edge really is critical, and leveraging something like the metaverse is fascinating because oftentimes, again, we're still living in this world where I think most people who are not in that space think of the metaverse and they think of, I always think of the book Ready Player One and then the movie and that in very immersive world. But you're showing practical application for that in ways that is truly life-changing and world-changing. So talk about a sense of mission, a sense of purpose. It really does make the difference when you're attracting talent and you're working hard for whatever that deliverable is. You're knowing you're making a difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, when we talk about talent, finding talent, something we always want to do. And Orlando and Florida are filled with incredible universities and incredible people. So you shared with me that you're a Florida native. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit about your personal journey. And, no one's career path is ever linear, but I always think it's fascinating to understand how somebody's, career and personal life has evolved and what you found and why you are still in the Florida community.
So I am a born and raised Floridian, like you said. I have it. I have on one of my arms here, right? Tattooed on my arm to
Oh,
prove
look
it.
at that. You
Yeah,
do have, so those people who are listening and can't see. So on Brian's right bicep, if you ever meet him, make him show you, is literally a map of Florida.
yeah. It's a little cheesy, but I love it personally. It was a reminder to never forget where I came from. So I grew up on the Space Coast. Um, Watching the ups and downs of the shuttle program over the years. My mom, I was a single mom, grew up with a single mom, only child, right? So all my friends and family, they all worked at the Space Center. They leave in the morning, drive off 20, 30 minutes, come back in the afternoon. That's what it was all based around. And I grew up around that. I grew up waking up in the middle of the night. The shuttle came home and boom, 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 and you're smashing, shuttle's home, right? The windows are
Yeah.
shaking.
But you
That's
got to see all those launches. I
got
mean,
to
I
see the beautiful
remember
night
that.
launches going out. And when I was
Yes.
younger, you actually got to
Yeah.
go out to the pad and you'd be dangerously close, which they don't let you do anymore. Which they stopped doing because lots of bad stuff was happening. But so at some level, I think that was kind of embedded into the culture of even where I grew up, right? Of have fun and go figure things out. And I came to Orlando. I've been in Orlando for over 20 years now. I've been in Orlando longer than when I grew up, where I grew up over on the Space Coast. And never thought to myself as I went through school that, oh, I'm going to go, whatever my next job was going to ended up being. It's like, oh, that's what I'm going to be when I grow up. Right.
Mm.
And whatever it is that I do now, I certainly didn't think I was going to be doing that 5 years ago. Right. So, I mentioned I worked for the government for 12 years and I was in the contracting field. So I signed those $1 billion contracts that, had the risk at the end because I was the guy that put pen to paper that had the ultimate responsibility, even if I had no responsibility for anything along either side of the chain. I got to be the person that would get yelled at if it was screwed up. Didn't know what that was, before I started doing it, right? And you just kind of went through it. I was an IT recruiter, before that. Didn't know I was going to do that at any point in my life. But all these little pieces of these little jobs, like a lot of people, as they go through the journeys, well, the same, your core self is inside there of figuring out how to do things better. And then you kind of learn through different things. You learn, life both lifts you up and beats you down throughout those processes, right? And you get to figure out what you're good at or not good at. And, eventually you start, just keep moving on to the next thing, whatever it may be. Right. And, that's, I, to give too much personal information, if anyone is still listening to my podcast at 23 minutes through here, I turned 40 later this year, right? But one of the greatest things in the last couple of years I figured out, and I'll help. This is a pro coming out of COVID. Nobody knows what they're doing, right? That's what I have learned, and
Yeah.
it's so freeing. Like on good days of being like, yeah, you know what? Everyone's making it up. So let's go out and figure out a way to do it. Because
Yeah.
those other people actually don't know it all. They sound great, but most people are just kind of figuring it out as they go. Right? So
It's very true. But the thing is then that no one innovates or operates on an island. When I hear people say, I'm a solopreneur, I'm thinking, you may be the only person currently in your company, but you're certainly not operating solo.
mhm.
No one is. And so, connecting with other people and being able to build whatever your team looks like, even in the moment, definitely makes that difference because everybody is figuring it out as they go. So you need people to bounce ideas off of. You need a team that you trust so that you can feel like you've got good sounding boards or people who can give you either space or guardrails, because sometimes people need those too.
Yeah. The guardrails is the key to my life, right? Stay
Fair
here,
enough.
stay here. Don't go over here.
Fair enough. So sometimes you need that, and that really does make a difference. So it covered a lot of ground in talking about what Cole is doing, this metaverse for the military, which is a fascinating concept. Being able to build and grow and scale a veteran-founded company into now part of an enormous community of companies, one of several that's able to provide service and compete against mega corporations, from your headquarters in Orlando, which is incredibly impressive, and knowing your niche so that you can be really effective. And some good, advice on how you build a strong innovation team. So I think that's really valuable information to be able to share. Everybody's trying to be innovative. It's truly the buzzword, but knowing how to do that effectively really is challenging. So I want to just kind of end on always, well, I won't ask you the hard question that I posed to you earlier about innovators, because I respect the process, but I always love to know, innovators who inspire you and drive you. And that can be people from anywhere in your life, anywhere in your learning, anywhere in your journey. So I'll just leave that one there in case you do want to share anything on that and put you on the spot, actually.
So I would say, I don't have the great historical figure that that he's like, this person, they got it, they did it. But they're out there everywhere, right? It's just those people that you cross in your day to day life that give you that motivation, right? It's that random podcast that you turn on and you're like, oh, I didn't think I was gonna get anything from this, today, but I listened to it because I like the host, and then an hour and a half in, oh, that's awesome. And that gives you that little ounce of motivation to keep going, right? That new nugget, that little belief of what you had. I was on a call this morning where I was listening a 10x talk to give a plug to our Orlando tech community over here,
Right.
right? And it was just a general what is the metaverse type thing, getting ready for a big event next week going on, and just different people with different perspectives that you're hearing and listening to and participating in, that you think you have your idea of what all these things are, like, oh, I didn't even think about that, right?
Mm.
So it's truly is like the day-to-day run-ins, the day-to-day stumble across of, yeah, that's good stuff right there. And that's kind of like my innovation church almost, right? Of like, yeah, okay, yeah, let's go, that's good, let's keep
That's
moving.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And that innovator that inspires you doesn't need to be a single person or, a notable person. Sometimes it's just being willing to experience something that's outside of your normal day to day. That matters tremendously. So often we are siloed in whatever our industry is and our focus for the day, and we don't ever take the time to pick our heads up and get involved in something that's really out of the ordinary for us. But that's where innovation, inspiration comes from. It's being part of a community, learning something that's new, or really out of our usual wheelhouse. So, good on you for taking time out of a busy schedule to listen to this and really, find some inspiration and support the community. I think that does matter and makes a difference. And that's something that anybody listening to this can certainly take home and utilize for sure. I'm very excited that you're going to be participating at Meta Center Global Week, which is this gigantic innovation celebration taking place in mid-October in downtown Orlando. And Cole Engineering will be part of the content, part of the program, and participating. And you giving back to the community in this way, making a big innovation event possible, is enormous. So, just thank you and kudos to you and the team for investing in innovation in Orlando and Central Florida and our community in this huge way. We're really grateful. And thank you for your time to be with us on the Synapse Podcast and share part of the reason that innovation lives here. It's been great chatting with you.
Thank you.